Hi there, my name is Marley and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today we are doing my July reading wrap-up, so talking about all of the books I read in the month of July. If you have not already, be sure to subscribe down below and let me know what your favorite book of July was. As always, before we get into the book reviews, let's just quickly go over my reading stats for the month. I actually had a pretty good reading month where I read 10 books. So we finally broke my 8-book streak that I was having of reading 8 books every single month. So I managed to read 10 books and squeeze in a couple that weren't even on my TBR. So that was great. That ended up being 3,774 pages, give or take. And my average rating was also a 4.25, which is pretty good. I didn't have any book that I rated lower than a 3.5. Then you can see my genre breakdown here in the chart. It was mostly a thriller month for me with 40 thrillers, but we also had 20% fantasy and 20% romance. And then we had 10% contemporary and 10% mystery. So kind of all over the place. For format, I read 70% physical and only 30% ebook, so that's great. And then for audience, I read 70% adult and then only 20% YA and 10% children's. For the author genre, I read from 8 female authors and only 2 males. And then in terms of if I've read from the authors before, I had read from 90% of the authors and I only had 1 new to me author. And in terms of the years the books were published, I mostly read books from this year, 2023, with 4 books. Then I read 2 books that came out last year in 2022, 1 from 2020, 1 from 2014, 1 from 2012, and then 1 from 1999. Alright, so now we'll get into the book reviews, talking about the lowest rated up to the highest rated. So starting out, my least favorite book of the month was the new Finlay Donovan book, Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun by Elle Cosimano. This book was featured in my Reading New Releases reading blog, where I tried to catch up on some new releases in that blog. This is the 3rd book in the Finlay Donovan series, which is a cozy mystery series that has been pretty popular on BookTube, but the popularity has sort of been declining with each book, and I can definitely see why. The quality has definitely been going down. But if you don't know, it's about this kind of struggling author, single mother named Finlay Donovan, who gets caught up in like the life of crime because she writes romance crime novels. And one time when she's talking about her book in public, someone thinks she's like a real life hitman, so they proposition her to kill someone for them, and then she just gets wrapped up in all this stuff. There's definitely really fun elements of this series, and I haven't read too many cozy mysteries, so that has been fun to sort of delve into the genre through this series. But unfortunately, this was my least favorite one so far. I definitely didn't hate it. I still had a pretty fun time, but I only gave it a 3.5 star rating. I just feel like the story is getting dragged out too much. It's going in some different directions I don't necessarily love. This was a very like pro-cop book as well, and there's just so much focus on the cops and one of her love interests who's a cop who I don't like, and that's a personal opinion. But yeah, definitely didn't hate this book, but unfortunately it was my least favorite of the month. These next 2 books, I kind of want to talk about them in tandem because I feel a little bit similar about them. But we have The End of Her by Shari Lapena, and then we have Lisa Jewell's The Family Remains, which was her release from last year. These are 2 of my favorite thriller authors. I always love both of their books. I typically rate them between 4 and 5 stars, and I normally read them in one sitting. So it just so happens to be that I picked up my least favorite books from these 2 ladies this month. Both of these books ended up coming in at a 3.5 star rating for me, which is the lowest I've ever rated them. Still not a bad rating, but these books did disappoint me a little bit. So we can go into The End of Her first by Shari Lapena. I did read this in a day. I will say that. I did read this in a day. So overall, you can tell I still did, for the most part, enjoy it. I still think her writing is so addicting, and I obviously love reading her writing. But the plot is what just didn't really deliver for me with this. We're following a married couple, as her books tend to be very like domestic thrillers. So we're following a married couple and they have a new baby who's very colicky, crying constantly. It's really hard on them and their marriage and their lives. This woman comes back into the picture and she's from the husband's past. So she starts claiming that the husband killed his previous wife. The husband had been married before and his wife knew that, and she knew that the wife had died, but this woman from the past, who was his old wife's best friend, is claiming he actually murdered her. She didn't just die. And she's, warning his current wife that he might do that again, and he's just after her money kind of thing. The mystery is sort of like, did he really kill his previous wife? Is he really planning to kill his current wife? Because this woman from the past does seem like she's kind of crazy and not necessarily trustworthy, since she is also trying to blackmail them and get money. Kind of interesting, but I don't know, even saying it, it's like that's not that interesting of a plot. I just feel like it didn't get it didn't get too crazy. I don't think the twists were that impressive. So yeah, obviously I had a good time reading it this one night, but not something that's going to stick with me, and it's not like it was so groundbreaking, amazing, or anything like that. So if you are going to read Shari Lapena, which I do recommend that you do, just maybe don't prioritize this one. And then the Lisa Jewell one, The Family Remains. So this is actually a sequel technically to her other book called The Family Upstairs. I read that book in a 24-hour reading blog, so I read it in one day. Because of that, I didn't remember the plot super well, but this technically can also be a standalone. So you didn't necessarily have to read the first book or really remember it going in. So we're following a few different characters in this one. Some of them are characters from the first book, as you can imagine. We're following these two siblings who were sort of survivors from the first book. They have secrets, they're kind of on the run and things like that. Then we have this other kind of new character, which is a woman who ends up getting into this abusive relationship with a man, and just her sort of journey with that. Oh yeah, and we're also seeing a detective who has found the bones of this person who seems to have died years ago. So we're seeing that, and we just are sort of seeing how all these different storylines intersect throughout. The exact same as Shari Lapena. Love her writing still. Read this super quick, stayed up late to finish it. Something about the writing is so good, but the plot, again, it was kind of like, what was the point of this? It was a little bit fun to kind of remember what had happened in the first book, since I had forgotten. It was almost like reliving those twists and those reveals for a second time. But then by the end, it was kind of like, what was the point of this? I didn't really see that there was one. That new character we had, again, didn't see really what the point was. There was definitely some disturbing things happening in this, like in most Lisa Jewell books, I'm talking sexual assault and things like that. But I was like, what was the point of it? What was the point? Again, if you're gonna read Lisa Jewell, pick up some of her other books, but you could probably skip this one. The next book is Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. This is another one I read for that new release reading blog. It is Talia Hibbert's first YA book, and it is a romance/contemporary book. But I do really think it lent heavily on the romance, which was really fun because I think a lot of YA romances or contemporaries sway to be more contemporary, where our main character is focused on all these other things, but this was really zeroed in on the romance, which was very fun, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. We're following our two main characters who are in high school, and they used to be friends, but they are now enemies. So it's a very fun kind of enemies, friends to lovers dynamic. Talia Hibbert is really good at bringing the humor and bringing the banter. So that was definitely a highlight of this book. But these two are very focused on their studies. They're kind of academic rivals. So they both end up going into this program, this kind of prestigious program, to try and win a scholarship or an award. So there's that forced proximity, and that's how they start to kind of form their friendship and their bond again. They aren't there the whole time like I thought they were going to be. There's still a lot of them back at school, back in their normal lives, and then they go on these excursions in the woods every once in a while. So that kind of surprised me and disappointed me a little. I thought they would be out in the wilderness kind of trying to survive more than they did end up being, but it still was a really cute book, and I would still recommend this, especially for any adults. If you're scared to read YA, this is probably one of the best YA books that I still think adults adult could like, probably because Talia Hibbert normally writes adult. So I definitely think this is a good book. Then we have another Lisa Jewell book, and this was The House We Grew Up In, and this is actually a literary fiction book. So all of the other books from her that I've read have been thrillers, but she wrote some sort of contemporary literary fictions before she started writing thrillers. When I got into this though, I did know it was going to lean more literary fiction, but I still hoped it would have more of a thriller vibe. I'll just say, like, it doesn't. So don't think that it does if you're picking this up. Just have the proper expectations. But this was a pretty interesting, drama-filled, dark book. It gets quite crazy. We are basically just following this family who grew up in this house. You know, there's the two parents, and the mom is dealing with a lot of mental health issues. She is a hoarder, so definitely be aware of that. Like, I could definitely see that storyline being triggering. Like, it was definitely really upsetting and crazy reading about this woman's hoarding. I haven't, you know, read too much about that before. I never used to really watch that hoarding show that was popular, so it was definitely disturbing, but also kind of interesting to see. And then we're following a bunch of the children. So there's 2 daughters and then 2 sons, and then a tragic event happens one year when they're all kind of like around the teenage age, and then we're seeing kind of their lives since then and how it was affected by that tragic event. We're definitely skipping all over with the timelines and with the point of views of all these different siblings and just how kind of messed up all of their lives become and how they were also traumatized by this event, and just see how the mom gets worse and worse with her hoarding. So yeah, it was definitely entertaining. Lisa Jewell's writing is always, again, so spectacular, but it is upsetting, and I could see maybe not everyone loving it. Like, maybe you would be like, okay, these characters are pretty unlikable. Because when I got to the end and I was reflecting on it and reading reviews, it's like there was something at the very end that just left me feeling unsatisfied. There was something they weren't telling us till the very, very end to have this sort of reveal, and I was just kind of disappointed with it. I wish we could have delved more into what that reveal meant. Instead, it was just kind of left off as like a shock value thing at the end, and I think we could have delved into it a lot more. So not a perfect book for me, but I did give it 4 stars. This next book I gave 4.5 stars, and that was You're Invited by Amanda Jayatissa, and I started reading this in my 24-hour reading blog, and I didn't manage to finish it in that video, so now I'm finally here to give my final review. So this is a thriller book I didn't hear too many people talk about, but I did hear a few. It's about a main character who's living in California. She has a very kind of obsessive personality. You're seeing that she definitely has some issues, some mental health issues, a bit of an unreliable narrator because of that. We see that she's very obsessed with her ex-best friend, who she has not had contact with for 5 years. And then she sees one day on social media that her ex-best friend is now engaged to her ex-boyfriend. And she is like freaking out and so upset, obviously, and we don't really know what falling out she had with both of these people. And then she gets invited to this wedding, which is also weird because she has not talked to them in so long, but she ends up going, and it's in Sri Lanka, which is where she is originally from, and this is where her ex-best friend is still currently living. So she goes there, and basically it's just about her at the festivities leading up to the wedding, interacting with her ex-best friend, ex-boyfriend again, with the family. We're finding out all about her past dynamics with these people, what led to their ultimate falling out. We know it's leading up to the bride-to-be, aka the ex-best friend, going missing, because we have this little thing at the beginning where we know she's missing, and it seems like maybe our main character is the one behind it, like maybe she killed her or something. So we're leading up to that. We don't really know what's gonna happen, and I got so into this book. I was enjoying it so much. I just highly recommend it. I gave it 4.5 stars if I didn't say. I thought it was really cool reading about Sri Lanka. Again, something I haven't really read too much about is like that culture and everything, so that was cool. And then also there was a point in the book where I'm like, okay, I think I know what's happening here, like what is the twist gonna be? And then the last bit of it, I was just like, wow, there was so many twists I was not expecting. It went to some crazy dark places. So I really do highly recommend this book. This is an underrated book for sure because I haven't heard too many people talk about it, but I think they should be. Then really quickly, I did read The Prisoner of Azkaban, the third Harry Potter book. If you don't know, I've been reading this series for the first time ever this year. I never read the books before, but obviously I was a big fan of the movies. So I just read this over the last few days. This is actually my favorite movie of the series and one of my favorite movies of all time. So I was really curious to read this and see what I thought. So far in the series, I felt like the movies have been following the books really closely in the first two. This one, I'm starting to sense like more of the differences happening, although it is still pretty similar to the movie. I do think I ultimately like the movie better. Like I just have that nostalgic love for it, and I do like how the time turner stuff is just delved into more in the movie, which is my favorite part. But what I did appreciate about this one was hearing more about the Marauders and like the history of the Animagus and that friend group with Sirius Black and Remus and everything. I feel like that is some of the stuff that got left out of the movies a little bit, and I really love those characters, so that was something I appreciated, and I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. Now we are going into my 5-star reads. I actually have 3 of them this month, which is pretty good for me. I don't normally have that many 5 stars. So we have The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the first book in the Raven Cycle series, and this is a book I read in that 24-hour reading blog as well. If you want to see more of my in real time thoughts, you can check that out. But basically this is a classic YA fantasy series that came out around 10 years ago, and I just hadn't gotten to it yet, but I've known I was gonna love it, and obviously I did. I gave it 5 stars. We're following a group of teenagers, starting out with our main character Blue. She is a teenage girl that has grown up in this like psychic family, psychic community. She doesn't have the typical psychic powers, but she has the ability to amplify others' powers. And then we have the Raven Boys. So it's a group of 4 boys who are all friends and go to the same like private school. Gansey is the leader of the crew and sort of the main character out of the 4 of them. They have this quest that they're on. They're searching for this like long lost Welsh king, something like that, who is said to be able to like grant your wishes or something if you find him. So they're on this quest. Their lives end up intersecting. There is an antagonist that's kind of trying to beat them to this king, and it really was, I think, just setting up the story. Oh, another interesting thing about Blue is that her mother has predicted that she will kill her true love when she kisses them. So there's this whole thing looming because we know Gansey is going to be her true love that she is going to kill apparently by kissing him. So honestly love that, and I'm very intrigued to see where that is going to go. But I just found Maggie's writing really great in this. I found the characters very funny. There were a lot of great lines, very lovable characters, and I'm excited to read more about them. All right, another 5-star read I had this month was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I was really truly not expecting this, just because I rarely ever give 5 stars to romances. Even Emily Henry, who I claim is my favorite romance author, I normally only give her 4 or 4.5 stars. But I just had the urge to give this a perfect rating. It is the sequel/companion book to Part of Your World by the same author, and I read that earlier this year, really loved it, gave it 4 stars. I have not read any of her previous books before that, and I don't know if I planned to read them because I've heard some mixed things about them. Anyways, going into this one, I was excited because it's following the best friend of the main character from Part of Your World named Brianna. She is a doctor, an ER doctor, I believe. She's recently going through a divorce. She has some other hard stuff going on where her brother is dealing with kidney failure and dialysis, and she's really having to take care of him. So she's having a rough go. Then we have Jacob, who is a new doctor starting at this hospital, and the reason he transferred to Brianna's hospital is because his ex-girlfriend has just gotten engaged to his brother, and he does not want to work with his ex anymore at the hospital, so he needs to kind of, get away from that. He also deals with a lot of anxiety, so there's a focus on like mental health. So they both have these kind of struggles going on. Because of that, they get off on the wrong foot. They really do not get along, particularly Brianna doesn't like him. So then, to apologize, he kind of writes her a letter to explain himself and kind of make it up to her, and then they start writing all these letters to each other back and forth, and then growing this kind of bond and friendship. Anyways, and then they end up deciding to fake date when Jacob's trying to prove to his family that he's not upset about the brother and ex getting married. He wants to prove he's moved on. So he lies about having a girlfriend, and then Brianna agrees to be this fake girlfriend when he agrees to give his kidney to her brother. I'm revealing a lot about this plot, but just so you can see, there's also a fake dating trope as well, which is always fun. I think I recently said in my unpopular bookish opinions that I felt like fake dating was getting a little overused. I was getting kind of tired of it. Forget about that. Forget about that. I actually really liked it in this one, that forced proximity, and something about these characters. I just loved their love story. I loved how it's slow burn. I will say there's a lot of miscommunication between these two, but I didn't even mind it really. The main character, Brianna, could get maybe a little annoying, but I loved just them having such a slow burn kind of to getting together. So many obstacles. I love that. I love angst. And I'll just say by the end I was crying. And I don't normally cry in books. I don't normally cry in romances, but it just really got to me for some reason. And also it was very funny as well. I didn't mention that Brianna was very funny in the first book. She's still so funny in this one. Same with Jacob. I just think they're so perfect together. And so I think this is one of my favorite romances I've ever read. For some reason, it just really connected with me. So highly recommend this. Then what I'm going to say is my favorite book of the month was The Only One Left by Riley Sager. Who's shocked? Me hyping up Riley Sager. It happens every year. This was also included in that new release reading vlog. Basically, we are following this caretaker who has her own sort of struggles. She's having trouble getting a job. So she ends up getting this job that like no one else wants, which is watching this woman or helping this woman named, what was her name again? Lenora. And Lenora's history is that when she was a teenager, her whole family was murdered in their house that's on this cliff. And she was the only one left. So everyone kind of thought it was her, but there was no definitive proof for her to get like arrested or anything. So she's just been living in this house alone and free, but everyone thinks, you know, she's a murderer. So no one else wants to work there. So Kit, our main character, goes to work there and take care of her. And while she's there, Lenora is like, you know what? I want to finally share my story of what happened that night, however many years ago. And so we're following Kit as she's unraveling the secrets of this house. There's other people living there, like the help and stuff like that. And yeah, it's very spooky, kind of gothic with this creepy house. The vibes are great. Throughout the whole thing, you'll see in my vlog, I had this one theory and I felt kind of disappointed that I had sort of figured everything out early on. And I was on the right track with something, but I did not completely figure it out. There's so many twists in the second half of this book. It's so great. And I know a lot of people have been not loving his last couple of releases, but I truly do believe if you give this book a chance, he'll be redeemed for you. I think this has the same vibes of Home Before Dark and the kind of double twist. It was more than a double twist actually at the end, but I just think it was so great. This is a thriller author. I really connect with his writing every time. I think I read this in like a day as well. It's just such a fun time. So many twists. Just great. And one of my favorite books of the year. So really recommend this. Alright, so those are the 10 books I read this month. Hopefully you got some recommendations from this video. Definitely let me know if you've read any of these books too and what you thought. Just thank you so much for watching, and I hope I will see you in my next video. Bye!